Welcome to the Streets and People podcast presented by Get Around Cabo Car Free. Get Around Cabo Car Free is a volunteer community movement advocating for more transport options for people who can't drive in Caboolture and Morayfield in Queensland. In today's podcast, we'll be covering one of these three broad topics. It might be Road Rules 360, where we discuss Queensland's road rules, the legislation, the design for people walking, biking, in wheelchairs or on a scooter. It might be Not Everyone Drives, where we chat with people whose transport options don't include a car in a car-dependent society. And it might be People and Projects, where our conversations are with people working on a specific aspect of inclusive transportation. Today we're doing one of our Road Rules 360 episodes. I'm here with John Burrill. We're on Yagurrabal Nation and the Gubbi people, so I apologise to any First Nations people if we've got the wrong nation, but we are trying to get it right. We are doing stopping and giving way today. I'm here with John Burrill, retired TMR road rules expert. Da, 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 da.
Once upon a time I was, yes.
Yes. We are here to entertain and inform. Yep. Hopefully we manage to do a bit of both. We are not giving advice or recommendation for action. Okay, so as we usually do with the Road Rules 360 episodes, I read out the description of the offence, the legislation and the fine. I'm reading from a page which is www.qld.gov.au/transport/safety/fines/cycling. You are reading from something else. You've got your phone.
I'm actually the legislation itself. It's the official short title is the Queensland Road Rules. The long title is Transport Operations Road Use Management Road Rules Legislation.
Well, it feels like a couple of weeks. I think it's a couple of weeks since we've done an episode, you're enjoying a lovely smoothie that I made this morning.
So that's the long title.
Okay.
And so it's a very interesting topic we've got today.
Woohoo! It's John always says every topic is always interesting.
Road rules are exciting.
Despite what your wife might think.
They involve everybody on the planet, or at least in Queensland, from our perspective, it affects everybody.
Yeah, it does.
There's no one that really, I suppose, unless you're a person that sits on the couch all day and every day and doesn't do anything or go anywhere, then anybody that moves around and travels or goes from A to B in any way, shape or form, road rules will impact you.
Okay. All right. Now, normally we just crack on into the description of the offence, the legislation and the fine. Yeah. But today you said it was really important to do a couple of definitions, stopping and giving way.
Just the definition of give way. It's one of those things that's often misinterpreted, often misunderstood. And I think it would be good just to literally read out the legal definition of give way, which is, it's in a part of the legislation called the dictionary. Basically, it's a list of definitions, and it's usually situated at the end of the regulation, and it's listed there all the words and phrases that are used, or most of the words and phrases that are used in the legislation are defined in the dictionary. Giving way, obviously, is one of those phrases. And here's what it says. Give way for a driver or pedestrian means: A, if the driver or pedestrian is stopped, remain stationary until it is safe to proceed. Or B, in any other case, slow down and, if necessary, stop to avoid a collision.
Okay, so why?
That's the definition.
So what is the bit that people often get a bit confused about?
There is a school of thought that says because the word collision is mentioned, there has to be a collision in order for there to be a fail to give way situation or an issue. Not the case. If you're on a collision course with somebody else, one of those parties is required to give way and the other is entitled to actually continue on the way, right? Now, sometimes if the person who is supposed to give way doesn't, then the other person is forced to give way. That's a fail to give way situation.
Okay, so we're talking bicycles here.
We are.
In terms of stopping and giving way, so if we're on a bicycle, the stopping is we come up to a stop sign or a stop line. Mm-hmm. That's a stopping. And then a giving way is, we've got a give way sign and a give way line. Yeah. And so in terms of who is where...
Well, probably the best way to give you an example of this is, I mean, the difference between a stop sign and a give way sign, the only difference is that you have to basically come to a complete stop at a stop line. That's the only difference. Once you've stopped, you have to give way.
Yeah.
If It's not a stop sign if it's just a give way sign or line. You approach the sign, you don't actually have to stop if there's nothing coming. But just to give you an example, and we've discussed previously amongst ourselves various intersections, and just if you can imagine a T intersection where there's a side road butts a dual carriageway, so you've got two lanes at the intersection heading in the same direction, and as you come up to the T intersection, the terminating road, there's two lanes.
Yep.
You're turning left into the left lane. If there is a car coming along in the right lane, there is no give way situation, because the person needs to be in the left lane in order for you to, being a left-turning bicycle rider, to give way to them. But if they're in the right-hand lane, you're not on the collision course. You're turning left into a lane that they're not even into. Now, it gets complicated when you start thinking, well, what if they make a lane change? Maybe best not to go into that here and now, but the essence is you can make turns in situations quite often where there is no give way situation occurring. So that's just an illustration.
All right. Just thinking about it in terms of a bicycle rather than a car. So we sometimes get sidetracked into what happens with a car. I always try and edit those bits out so people probably
we are talking about a cyclist who is required to give. I mean, obviously, a cyclist approaching an intersection with a give way or stop sign is required to give way in the same way as any other vehicle. If you're turning left at an intersection, you're required to give way to, generally speaking, vehicles coming from the right. If it's a T intersection. If it's a crossroads intersection, if you're turning left, you have priority over oncoming vehicles that are wanting to turn right.
Good luck. You also have to protect your own life.
But then this same issue comes up. If a right turning vehicle is turning into a right lane and you're turning left into a left lane, there's no give way situation. There's no point saying, oh, this oncoming vehicle has to give way to this left turning vehicle.
Okay.
You know, there are times when there is no give way situation arises, even though the sign says give way.
Okay.
It doesn't mean to say that you've got to give way to everything in every situation.
Okay.
It's only really if you're on a collision course.
Okay. If you're on a bicycle and you've got a car coming, basically you always want to be a little bit
cautious.
You're always more cautious because
That's
cars,
right.
you know, you hit a car comes along, basically, you'll end up in the emergency department.
Well, if you reverse the situation and say, okay, you've got a car come up to a T intersection, turning left, and a bicycle coming along from the right, and the bicycle can be in either the left lane or the right lane. The bicycle's in the left lane, then the bicycle has priority. The car at the intersection has to wait for you to pass.
See, there's so few people riding bikes and pedestrians these days that people just don't even think about looking for it. And that's, I think, the biggest issue in terms of road safety. And there is this idea, I was thinking about this on the weekend, that we have such compartmentalized lives these days, you know, to do with zoning. So you have houses over here and work over there and hospital over there and school over here and park over there. Whereas historically, they've always been everywhere and everyone's been sort of doing all those activities in exactly the same place. But I was thinking on the weekend, this is given the idea that the road is only for cars. That's the zone for the cars, and that's incorrect. All right, let's ready, set, go. Okay. So the description of the offence is failing to stop at a stop sign or line at an intersection, and that's Queensland Road Rule section 67 paragraph 2. The fine on that is $4.64. I'll just keep going for the rest, a couple more of these. Failing to give way to a vehicle at an intersection with a stop sign or line, so that's 67 paragraph 3, and again $464. And failing to give way to a pedestrian when turning at an intersection with a stop sign or line, that's section 67(4), and that's $464. So pedestrian here means also somebody on a scooter, and it also means someone in a wheelchair.
Yeah, those modes of travel are classed as pedestrians. This is fairly self-explanatory in that when you consider the give way definition that I've read out. At a stop sign, you have to stop and then give way. At a give way sign, if there's something coming, you would stop because you have to give way. But if there isn't anything coming, you don't actually have to stop. There is a hierarchy here that you'll often see come out. Generally speaking, bicycle riders have to give way to pedestrians. It's the same on footpaths. Yep. I think a few episodes ago we talked about bicycle offences on footpaths.
Yep.
One of the offences is to fail to give way to a pedestrian.
Yep.
This is a similar sort of thing. If you're turning on a bicycle into a street and there's somebody crossing the street that you're entering, then you're required to give way to them.
Anything else to top secret that's worth exploring on that one? Should we just keep going on to the next two?
I think we can keep going.
All right. Failing to stop at a stop sign or line at places other than intersections, crossings or twin red lights. Section 68, paragraph 2, fine $464. And failing to give way to a vehicle or a pedestrian at a stop sign or line at places other than intersections, crossings or twin red lights. And that's section 68, paragraph 3. Fine again is $461.
I think this is another of those sets of rules where they're covering all bases. Most stop signs and give way signs are at intersections, but there are places where they're placed not at intersections. The typical example is, if you actually look in the road rules, you'll see diagrams of various scenarios, and there is one looking at. I've got it here on my phone, and basically what it is if you can imagine a service road, which is a small road next to the main road, and you might have a break in the strip. It's a nature strip between the service road and the main road. Well, you might have just a little exit that comes between the service road and the main road for traffic to merge onto the main road. Not classed as an intersection. It's something other. And it's those sorts of places these rules capture. These fines that we're talking about here are cyclists, so those rules apply to cycles as well as any other vehicle passing through these esoteric little places that aren't intersections, but where you do have a stop sign. And there are some, as we go down here, you'll see there are some even more specific places where stop signs and stop lines are put. Let's continue.
Well, I was actually thinking about whether you have stop signs at school, in school zones, but maybe with that's something different.
Stop signs in school zones. Well,
you know, just to keep children safe.
If you're thinking about the children's crossing, the children's crossing has a stop line, as opposed to standard marked pedestrian crossings are black and white stripes.
Yeah. Children's
crossing is just a line on opposite sides of the road.
Yeah.
It is a stop sign or a stop line,
yeah,
but it's only activated by the person who, or persons who are operating the stop-go signs or the stop signs at the crossing. And the only time they actually come into play is when the two flags are out.
Okay.
You've probably seen the two flags that they put up. It activates that children's crossing. Once the flags are away and the people have gone home, it's not anything.
That's very interesting, because I was talking with some high school students recently from Caboolture High School, and they were going, how come cars are driving at 60 or 70 kilometres an hour in a school zone?
They shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, that's right. But maybe it's because there aren't the flags there isn't a lollipop person, because apparently there's no lollipop person in high schools.
Okay.
So that's what they were saying. That stops now in primary school.
As for the speed limit is governed by the speed limit sign, the school zone speed limit sign, which is a different thing to the crossing itself. The crossing, oftentimes, you don't have to have the crossing supervisor there for the crossing to become activated. It's the flags that activate it. But where there are supervisors, then there are rules that apply with regard to those supervisors. The main one being the difference between a standard pedestrian crossing, black and white, and a school zone or a school crossing is you have to stop and give way if anybody is on the crossing at all. In other words, even while the crossing supervisor is walking back to the curb, you have to stop and give way. On a standard pedestrian crossing, once the person has crossed your path, you can continue on. So long as you obviously still giving way to them and not hitting them or doing anything crazy or making them jump out of your path.
Yeah.
If they've crossed the place where you're wanting to drive, you are allowed to continue on over the crossing.
Okay. We have digressed past stops. So it was very interesting because of this conversation I had with school students. That's on a previous episode, so I recommend that's the Caboolture High School students. So I'm cross-referencing there. Go and listen to that one. Those students were just amazing. So anything else to add on that one, John, do you think?
No, I don't think so.
Failing to give way at a giveaway sign or line at an intersection, not a roundabout. That's section 69-2, and that's $464. Failing to give way at a giveaway sign or line when turning left using a slip lane at an intersection, not a roundabout, 69 paragraph 2A, $464. And then we've got failing to give way to a pedestrian at a giveaway sign or line when turning at an intersection, not a roundabout, section 69 paragraph 3, $464. And I'm just going to do one more. Failing to give way if two or more riders face a mixture of various signs, lines at an intersection. Section 69A, $464.
It all sounds very complicated, doesn't it? And
Well, it just sounds boring. I mean, I was reading them going, oh my goodness, who writes this stuff? I think I just kind of I've become disembodied and go up into the corner of the room because I read it. It's so boring.
These are just the short titles. It only starts to get exciting when you read the rules
Ooh,
themselves.
do tell, John.
Well, I think probably the thing to pull out of this is the whole thing of mixed signs. For example, you can have, let's just say, a T intersection where the terminating road might have a stop sign, but then you might have the road coming in from the right might have a give way sign. And it's very strange. I often wonder, what the reasoning is behind this. It all seems very strange because it really does complicate things. For example, you might have a crossroads where going in one direction across the crossroads, you've got a stop sign. Going from the opposite direction, there might be a give way sign, not a stop sign. And the thing to draw out of that is, so far as giving way is concerned, there is absolutely no difference. The only difference is you've just got to stop at the stop sign. But the give way rules that follow on from that are the same as if the signs were the same. Basically, this 69A makes it perfectly clear that it's captured in the rules. Because you get people saying, oh, well, he had a stop sign and I had a give way sign, so he's supposed to give way to me because the stop sign's more powerful than the give way sign. That's the usual sort of monologue, not the case at all. Another interesting thing to pull out of this is you notice the omission of roundabouts.
Yes, not a roundabout.
Not around a vehicle, and this is something that has always been a little bit contentious. Whenever you're turning at an intersection, you're usually required to give way to pedestrians.
So is this for bicycles and drivers?
Bicycles,
Yep.
any vehicle. Not the case at roundabouts. Any vehicle, including a bicycle, turning left or wherever they're turning, in fact, there is no priority given to pedestrians specifically crossing at the roundabout. What engineers generally try to do is to provide for pedestrians to give them a safe crossing away from the actual roundabout itself. In other words, say you might have 4 legs of the roundabout. You might have 4 separate crossings that are a little bit away from the roundabout to enable pedestrians to
I know.
cross safely.
You end up walking, an extra.
Miles
Like
and miles.
it's just
Yeah.
crazy. It's just crazy.
So disadvantages of the pedestrians.
Yeah, I mean, doesn't it all? Next, we're up to failing to give way at a giveaway sign on a length of narrow road or at a bridge. Section 70, $464. Failing to give way at a giveaway sign at other places. Section 71, paragraph 1,
Yep,
$464.
Section 70, which is giving way at a sign or a bridge or a length of narrow road, is another specific situation which isn't an intersection. There's a lot of them around, particularly where you've got little narrow bridges going across rivers where you'll have one direction of traffic where you've got a give way sign and the other direction doesn't have a give way sign. If you're on the side where there is a give way sign, then obviously even as a cyclist, even if, and this is where it does start to get a little bit strange, even if it's a cycle coming in the opposite direction, and even though there might be plenty of room for 2 cyclists to cross within that area, strictly speaking, the give way priority applies to the cyclist that's facing the give way sign. Now, I'd go so far as to say that considering the definition of give way, 2 cyclists heading up towards each other, it would have to be a very narrow bridge or a piece of infrastructure, traffic calming device, whatever it might be, for 2 cyclists to actually be in contention and actually be on a collision course. It's meant for cars. Most of these rules really are geared towards cars. They become rather silly when you apply them to cycles.
Yeah. So is this another one where we go, all right, please, bicycle advocacy people, ask for a legislation change because is it worth the effort?
No, I don't think it is, because I just think it's one of those situations where you wouldn't be on a collision course if there's enough space on the bridge for 2 bicycles. You could easily sail through the give way sign and the person coming from the opposite direction has got plenty of room to continue on their journey as well. If you do get a really narrow bridge, and usually we're talking about bridges that you can only get 1 car down. Well, if there's enough space to get 1 car down, then you can pretty much guarantee you're going to be able to get two bicycles,
Yeah.
even if they are heading in opposite directions.
Yeah.
So this is a rule where
Bridges were made when there weren't so many cars.
Yes.
Maybe there were no cars. Yeah, so it's just the bridge itself is to a previous era and people didn't drive huge great monster trucks and cars everywhere.
Yes.
Okay, so the next one is Failing to give way at an intersection, not a T intersection or roundabout, without traffic lights or stop give way signs or lines. So that's section 72(1), paragraph 464. Yeah. Failing to give way at a T intersection without traffic lights or stop give way signs or lines. Section 73, paragraph 1, $464.
This is an interesting one. This is what is commonly referred to in the department as an uncontrolled crossroads. There are very, very few of them in urban areas now. There's still quite a few out in country towns though, where it's just a crossroads, there's no main road, they're both the same size roads, there's no paint, there's no signs, there's absolutely nothing there. So who gives way? You know, you get two vehicles of any kind heading towards this crossroads intersection. Who gives way? This is where the old famous phrase comes in. You always give way to your right, mate. It's not true. You don't always give way to your right, but at an uncontrolled crossroads, you always give way to your right.
Okay.
So if you're a cyclist coming along the road and there's any vehicle coming from,
and there's a huge, great big
right,
truck with, you know, a rail train going back, stop for them.
you stop for the cycle, but look, let's turn that in reverse, Wendy. There's a huge, great monster truck coming down the road, and you're on your bicycle coming from the right. He's got to stop for you.
Yeah, well,
He's got to stop for you and let you cross. I've got a feeling that doesn't happen very often, but that is actually what the rule says.
I wanna hold that one up.
Yep.
Okay, so the next one is failing to give way when entering a road from a road-related area or adjacent land. So section 474, paragraph 1, $464. Yeah. Failing to give way when entering a road-related area or adjacent land. Not quite sure what the difference is.
Okay, one of them is...
I have to give the section number. 75, paragraph 1, $464.
If you're on a bicycle, leaving your house, your driveway, and you're crossing a road-related area, in other words, you are in a road-related area as you cross the footpath or the driveway or whatever it is, and you enter the road, you're required to give way. The same goes for if you're in a bicycle turning into your driveway, and there's somebody, maybe a pedestrian, walking along a footpath who happens to be in your way as you're about to turn, then you're required to give way to them. So that's all it is. It's just going into or out of private property or any other kind of road-related area for that matter. It can be shopping centre, car park, or any road-related area, fuel station.
Sure. I was just thinking because so often, I'll be honest, that one, I want to have a camera for that one every single time because I want to bust them on that all the time because that is actually something that car drivers do. You're cycling along and a car driver will just cross in front of you. It's like, it's my road, get out of my way. You know, that either they don't see you or they don't care, whatever it is.
Yeah. And there are some, I would encourage people to actually look at this legislation, even though it sounds fairly long-winded. It actually is long-winded. But
yes,
there are
so if you want to go...
there. The diagrams really do help to illustrate what we're talking about here. They're simple diagrams, but they show exactly what we're talking about here with regard to giving way.
So what website are you on?
If you do a search for Queensland legislation, go into that and then click on the link for in-force legislation and then subordinate legislation, and then you click up, there's a whole long list and it's all done in alphabetical order. So you click on T, and that's Transport Operations, Road Use Management, Road Rules Regulation. You scroll down, you find that, click on it, opens it up.
Okay.
There's about 400 rules all there.
Right. And so you're telling people, you know, you should go out and have a look at the legislation.
Spend a few hours looking. We'll just flick through the diagrams. Diagrams are fun.
You know, sometimes if you're in hospital or whatever, or your doctor's room and you're waiting for hours and hours and hours, this is one of those things that if you really wanted to, this is what you could be doing.
You could.
Don't watch a funny video. Do this, read this. Your life will be changed. Okay, so the next one is failing to give way to an oversized vehicle under escort, section 79A, paragraph 1, $278. That's much less. Failing to stop at a children's crossing when a handheld stop sign is displayed or when a pedestrian bicycle rider is on or entering the crossing, section 80, paragraph 2, $464. And proceeding after stopping contrary to a handheld stop sign at a children's crossing, section 80, paragraph 3, $464. Oh, we're still going on the children's crossings here. Proceeding after stopping while pedestrian bicycle rider is on or entering a children's crossing, section 80, paragraph 4, $464.
Okay, well, that covers a lot of bases there.
So the first one there about oversized vehicle under escort.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I'm surprised about that one because there are some rules here which don't have a bicycle component to them. And one of those is giving way to police and emergency vehicles. So for some reason, there is no offence for a cyclist if the cyclist fails to give way to a police or an emergency vehicle.
Don't give them any ideas. We shouldn't be telling anybody this.
We never mentioned that.
We never mentioned that.
But an escorted vehicle is occasionally you get a huge load. It normally would not be allowed on the road. They have to get a special permit, and there's an escort vehicle, sometimes one in front, sometimes behind, sometimes two. There's sometimes a lot of them. Sometimes, especially at night, you'll see a whole house being transported down the road. Everybody's required to give way to those in that situation, including cyclists.
I think that makes sense because it's so difficult to manoeuvre those.
Absolutely.
Whereas one of the SES vehicles, that's slightly different. Yeah. Okay, so then we've got all the children's...
Yeah, children's crossings, bicycle.
Yep.
You're coming up to a children's crossing, the same applies to you as it does if you're in your four-wheel drive. One of the things I didn't mention before is the difference between a children's crossing and a standard crossing. You have to give way to any person who are intending to move on to the crossing. If you're on a standard crossing, you've got to actually be on the crossing before you have priority. In other words, your foot has to be stomped on the road. You then claim that crossing. It's a different rule for children's crossings, and you can see why.
Yeah.
Because, kids around, they want things to be a lot safer and they're given a lot more priority. So if you're entering a crossing and you're riding your bicycle towards that crossing, even though the people might not be on the crossing yet, you're still required to give way to them. Interesting. Okay.
Failing to give way to a pedestrian bicycle rider on a pedestrian crossing, section 81(2), $464. Passing a vehicle that is stopping at a children's or pedestrian crossing, section 82, $278. So that's actually a much less lower offence.
Well, that's an interesting one. I mean, overtaking a vehicle, it doesn't matter whether it's on the right or the left-hand side. If you're overtaking a vehicle towards a pedestrian crossing and they're queued up for a children's crossing, that is an offence. It's one of those, again, probably very few tickets issued, particularly to cyclists on this. But
yeah, so it's a lesser offence. I'm surprised that, I would have thought it was super dangerous. Now that we have these big, tall SUVs, you often can't see anybody's children. So if you're passing that, I think that's terrible. Okay, let's see. Failing to give way to a pedestrian in a shared zone, section 83, $464. Failing to give way to a vehicle when driving through a break in the dividing strip, section 84, paragraph 1B, $464. Failing to give way when entering a turning lane from a painted island, and that's section 85 and $464.
Well, let's just have a think about shared zones. Again, a lot of strange ideas about shared zones, but the best way I find to describe a shared zone is if you can imagine the whole area beyond that sign is the equivalent of a pedestrian crossing. Yep. Pedestrians have 100% priority, even over cyclists.
Yep.
If you enter that area and pass a sign that says shared zone, there's usually a low speed limit there as well, 10, 20 kilometres an hour, which probably wouldn't be a problem for a cyclist anyway. But the critical thing is, and this is the rule that's being cited here, if you're on a bicycle, pedestrian can be walking wherever they like in that shared zone. As a cyclist, you're required to give way to them, even if it looks like you're riding along a road, because this is another issue that we could probably go on for hours about. But the whole idea of shared zones is that they were meant to look like something different to a road. like a pedestrian, an area that looks like a mall sort of thing.
What?
A mall, like a M-A-L.
Mole, okay. I thought
My
a
English
mole,
accent
and I'm going,
mole.
molehill, is it
Yeah,
like
mate,
that?
nah.
Or,
I'm
yeah.
a Londoner,
Okay, what is he saying?
They're meant to look like that, but they don't always look like
No,
that. They look just like an ordinary road, and you pass this sign that says shared zone, and you're riding your bicycle without actually, or you may not be under the realising that pedestrians they can walk out straight in front of you, and you have to be ready to give way to them.
That's just like bad design. I always think traffic engineers who design that, who tick that box saying, I approve, I think that they should be responsible for every single collision, every single fatality that happens on that street. Because I think if traffic engineers were responsible for every single collision on the roads, I think we'd have different roads. At the moment they skirt that issue. I don't know how they manage to get around that because...
Well, I mean, a lot of shared zones, they are engineered in a way that they do look like somewhere different, a pedestrianised precinct, but they don't always. And you're right. I mean, and usually it's a cost-effective thing.
Cost-effective. But I mean, how much is a person's life when it's cost-effective? I mean, I've looked at the stats on collisions. 3 people a day killed in a car crash. 2 people an hour leave a car crash with a disability. So, I mean, that's Australia-wide, not just Queensland. So to say, I shirk my responsibility, I just think that's just really bad.
Just trying to sort of give you another example of a shared zone. You do see the shared zone sign a lot as you enter multi-level car parks. When you've got a shopping centre car park with 4 or 5 levels or what have you, and
that's
that
cars,
can
though.
be a shared zone. It's very much a car space.
Yeah.
But even as a cyclist, you're still required to give way to any pedestrians that happen to be walking around.
I might not always do that because I feel so intimidated by the cars. I'm just like, get me out of here because it's so horrible, and they're horrible places. Okay, so failing to give way when entering a median turning bay to an oncoming vehicle already in the bay, section 86 paragraph 1, 464. Failing to give way when entering traffic from the side of the road, section 87 paragraph 1, $464. And then failing to give way when entering traffic from a median strip parking area, section 87.3 paragraph 3, and that's $464.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just to pick up on one of those, if let's just say there's a left turn lane is situated directly after a painted island. So you might have a painted island which is big white stripes, with a line around the edge. You are allowed to go over that or drive or ride over that painted island to enter the turning lane. But if there's anybody entering the turning lane from the adjacent lane, you're required to give way to them. It applies to cycles in the same way that it would be to cars. But there's not a lot of people realise that you are allowed to go across that painted island anyway. You'll find very few people actually go across the painted island in order to get into that turning lane. I do.
Did you know all the legislation? You wrote half the legislation. You wrote half of these road
sometimes
rules.
Get tooted up. Well, you're not allowed to do that. Well, actually...
You could say, I'm the king. I can do whatever I like. I wrote that road rule.
It's one of those, again, rules that not a lot of people understand or know about. One day I'm sure the Department of Transport and Main Road will actually get around to publicising or publishing some information about these weird and wonderful things. They don't do it very much.
This is what we're doing. Sure. This is what we're doing.
Yeah, we're doing it for them.
I know, and we don't get paid for it. How bad's that?
You should send them a bill when...
How quick do you think the payment will come through? So anything else? Because we're going to wrap up there. Anything else to conclude with?
I don't think so. I think there's plenty to chew on there.
Okay, I'll take your word from it. I know it's all very interesting, John.
Look at the rules. Don't just look at what the department has put on the website. I think that's a key thing here. There's a lot of information on the Department of Transport and Main Roads website, but it isn't comprehensive. It doesn't cover everything. It covers probably the most important things and the things that they think you really need to know.
Yeah.
first and foremost, but
Yeah.
there's a whole lot of other stuff that you can actually understand and pick up if you look at the rules themselves.
So the legislation. And we gave that URL before,
Yes.
or how to find that anyway, if we
Yep.
didn't give the exact thing. Next time we'll give the URL, your URL. That's what we'll do.
Okay, do it.
Okay. All right, we'll call it a day there, I think. Fantastic.
Wendy.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
You're amazing. An
Oh,
absolute
so are you,
font of
Wendy.
knowledge.
We're doing a good job.
We're a
you know.
crack team. Fantastic. All right, that's it. Have a great week, everyone.
Yep. Bye,
Bye.
folks.
Bye. Thanks for enjoying Streets and People presented by Get Around Cabo Car Free. We publish our podcast regularly at the usual places and on our website where you can find out more about us. getaroundcabocarfree.com.au. That's www.getaround, get around, that's pretty straightforward. Cabo, C-A-B-O, that's short for Caboolture. Car Free, C-A-R-F-R-E-E. There's no hyphen in that. .com.au. Our theme music is The Thief on AM Sound, which is just like our cars on our streets, always stealing the space. So let's stop that thief.